special interaction with a prominent figure in the Silicon Valley. Venture capitalist Vinod Khosla says Indian startups have the potential to make a global impact.
It's a great time because, as Warren Buffett said, when others are fearful, one should be aggressive. We are in a down cycle, but I will tell you, euphoria is not a great time to invest. One of the big things, there's a lot of talent, which is the oil of startups coming from large companies. So large companies are hemorrhaging talent, they're doing layoffs. Those are the people you want to help build your startup. The other thing is because not all your competitors are getting a lot of funding. If you have a good idea and a good team, you have a huge advantage over a more liberal time where everybody can get funding. So I do think it's a very good time for investors. You can build better teams, cheaper, faster, easier, with better talent.
Well, it certainly is a very tricky environment right now, Mr. Khosla, when it comes to the startup landscape. There is a lot of uncertainty. There's global recessionary fears. We've been seeing pink slips being doled out by the dozen, to put it very mildly. But you had gone on record to say that you need to follow ace investor Warren Buffett's mantra that you should be fearful when others are greedy. In light of that, what do you think startups need to do in terms of their focus on profitability? What do you think will separate the men from the boys?
Well, my view is India is particularly good at what's the right term, Jugaad innovation. Like really surviving in bad times is a strength, particularly of the Indian entrepreneur. And I think frugal startups make for better startups in the long term because you take more time testing your ideas. If you raise a lot of money, then you're likely in execution mode and you fail to spend enough time saying, am I building the right thing? What will work? Is my assumptions about customer acquisition right? Those kinds of questions. And I think a frugal time makes you focus on the key risks a lot more. And that results in better startups. So I do think it's a good time. Also keep in mind when funding is less available for your competitors too. And you're not paying Google and Facebook a lot of money to advertise your startup because your competitors aren't doing it and things become more capital efficient. So I think it's a particularly good time.
Right, and back home, everyone's calling this the manufacturing renaissance of India. The US as well has become very serious when it comes to manufacturing. What about India betting on this space? Do you think that we have a competitive advantage?
First, as I mentioned before, COVID has caused the world to look up and say we can't be dependent on China. And China's been the manufacturing hub. Now, the most logical alternative is India. There's a few other countries like Vietnam and others that have good opportunity. But India is a very good place where alternatives to China can develop. And so I'm very bullish on that. Having said that, I don't think you do it the same way China did it. China did it with very low-cost labor from villages into cities, into manufacturing centers. I think what India should do is take manufacturing expertise. So use engineering talent to reduce the cost of manufacturing, because the world won't pay more just because it's outside of China or made in India. And so you have to get the same cost, and you can get there by either having lower cost labor or having lower cost engineering talent that reduces the manufacturing, the labor content of manufacturing. And I think that's a better approach for companies in India to take, because there's so much manufacturer talent available, engineering talent available in India. So, and I do think that'll be a superior approach. So using robotics more, using automation more and using talent to develop those processes.
And Mr. Khosla, we can't deny the fact that there have been revolutionary technologies in India, in particular for public goods, such as UPI or even ONDC. Do you think that the ingredients for explosion of digital transformation are in place in India?
I think the combination of what is called the India stack, UPI is a part of the India stack, but digital ID, Aadhaar, UPI just makes startups so much easier to do in these areas. Combine that with the power of AI, and even a low-income household could have a wealth advisor on how to manage their finances. And they need it more than sort of Mukesh Ambani does.
And if we were to get to the crux of it, a large population, in fact, the true India is really known by Bharat, which is in rural or semi-urban areas. Do you think that Indian startups should really focus on providing solutions for the problems that are faced by the people in Bharat? Could this really help in really encashing our demographic dividend?
Look, areas like rural areas often get ignored. There are very large markets because there's a large number of people, not as much wealth, but the most impactful startups, especially for those founders who are trying to have a large impact on Bharat, they apply to a lot of rural areas. So if you have an AI tutor, which we're doing not for profit, it'll benefit the rural areas the most, where good quality teaching is harder to get. One of my favorite projects in India is another nonprofit effort called 10bedicu.org. What 10-bed ICU came out of the COVID crisis and the realization in remote parts of India, ICU beds are not available. And we've now led by a guy called Sirikant Nadamuni, who, by the way, was the CTO of the Aadhaar effort under Nandan Nilekani, has started the 10-bed ICU effort. And we have over 200 ICUs set up in remote districts. There's only 700 districts in India. We already have ICUs set up in 700 remote parts of these districts, 200 of these districts in remote parts. So we just did the inauguration with the Chief Minister of Assam recently, just did an inauguration with the Chief Minister of Nagaland recently, and same in Karnataka in the remoter parts. So these are remote ICU beds with the expertise being remote, being in a metropolitan center like in Manipur or something, in a regional hospital, but the ICU bed itself is in a remote area. That kind of innovation is very exciting to me.
And I have to ask, because there's that highly anticipated battle, if you will, between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, Twitter versus Threads. Are you on Threads, and how do you see this battle really playing out?
I have joined Threads. They've gotten a lot of subscription, and that is a real battle. But the task ahead for Threads is to get a lot more usage. And, Mark Zuckerberg knows social just about as well as anybody else on the planet. So I'm sure he's worrying about how to get more usage, more interaction. And it'll be an interesting battle. So I do think it's a large battle. I think the world will be better off if there's both Threads and Twitter, but we'll see.
Well, yes, indeed. We'll have to see how things pan out on that front. But I wanted to understand from you, do you chase the idea or the entrepreneur? Do you think it's critical to have a mix of both, or would you be betting more or tilting more towards one side?
Well, between those two, the entrepreneur is more important. You have to have a great entrepreneur, and you have to have large, interesting markets and MVP small starting point. Because you can't pursue a large idea from day one, but you can have a large idea vision from day one and pursue a narrow path.